Good day everyone. So today we will discuss how beautiful realism and impressionism art was. Art is like a water. It is overflowing in pressures and excitements. So today we will explore realism and impressionism art. Are you ready? Realism art. It began in 1848 to 1900s. As its name implies, realism was concerned with accurately portraying the visual world. Here in realism, what we see in the real world depicts in the art. It is sparked by the 1848 revolution. Realist painting often depicted the conditions of the working class in a form of social commentary, but it also extended to new styles of landscapes and portraiture. What we see in the real world depicts in the arts here in realism. From the word itself, realism, real, totoo. Makikita natin mamaya kung ano-ano ang mga ito. Realists revolted against the exotic subject matter and exaggerated emotionalism of the Romanticism that had dominated French literature and art since the late 18th century. Realist is the time of French. Halos lahat ng mga painters dito sa realism ay mga French. Realist works depicted people of all classes in ordinary life situations, which often reflected the changes brought on by the industrial and commercial revolutions. Ang mga masasalamin sa mga artworks here ay mga certain scenarios na makikita natin sa pang-araw-araw na pamumuhay. Realists tended to showcase sordid or untidy elements in their paintings. There are important figures in the realist art movement. They were Gustave Courbet, Honoré Daumier, and Jean-François Millet. The picture was Gustave Courbet. Realism in painting. There are two important figures in the realist movement. They were Gustave Courbet and Jean-François Millet. Realism arose in opposition to Romanticism, which had dominated French literature and art since the late 18th century. Realist painters often depicted common laborers, mga manggagawa, and ordinary people in ordinary surroundings. What we see in our surroundings engage in real activities as subjects for their works. Kumbaga sa Pilipinas, ito yung mga makikita natin like magsasaka, mangingisda, mga common na mga laborers sa Pilipinas. Gustave Courbet is known as the main proponent of realism, and his paintings challenge convention by depicting an idealized peasants and workers, often on a grand scale traditionally reserved for paintings of religious or historical subjects. Jean-François Millet is noted for his scenes of peasant farmers, of which the gleaners. Later, we will see the gleaners. It is one of his most well-known due to its depiction of the realities of the lower class. Dito sa realism, makikita natin yung mga problema, yung mga nangyayari sa totoong buhay sa mga panahong ito. But before that, let's find out what is Pre-Raphaelites or Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. So what is this? The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was a group of English painters, poets, and critics. It was founded in 1848 by William Holman Hunt, John Everett Millais, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti. So, tatlo lang sila. But soon, William Michael Rossetti, James Collinson, Frederick George Stephens, and Thomas Woolner joined this, and they formed a 7-member brotherhood. The Pre-Raphaelites sought to reform art by rejecting what they considered to be a mechanistic approach, first adopted by the Mannerist artists, was a succeeded Raphael at Michelangelo. They believed the classical poses and elegant compositions of Raphael in particular had been corrupting influence in the academic teaching of art, hence the name Pre-Raphaelite. They wanted a return to the abundant detail, intense colors, and complex compositions of Quattrocento Italian art. So who is Raphael? Raphael's real name, was Raffaello Sanzio da Urbino. He was known as Raphael. He was an Italian painter and architect of the High Renaissance. His work is admired for its clarity of form, ease of composition, and visual achievement of Neoplatonic ideal of human grandeur. It was influenced by Romanticism. The Pre-Raphaelites thought freedom and responsibility were inseparable. Nevertheless, they were particularly fascinated by medieval culture, believing it to possess a spiritual and creative integrity that had been lost in later eras. In later years, the movement divided and moved into separate directions. The Realists were led by Hunt and Millais, while the Medievalists were led by Rossetti and his followers, Edward Burne-Jones and William Morris. The reason of Pre-Raphaelites is to bring back the Raphael influence. What is Mannerist? Mannerist is an artist who uses Mannerism, a style of European art that emerged from the later years of the Italian High Renaissance around 1520. Quattrocento, the 1400s, the 15th century Renaissance Italian period. This is an Pre-Raphaelite's artwork, Ophelia, by John Everett Millais. It reflects the Pre-Raphaelite use of brilliance of color in composition. Makikita natin sa painting na halos totoo yung pagkakakulay sa nakikita natin in real world. The colors, the texture of the color is parang totoo. Another is a Pre-Raphaelite Millais painting titled Christ in the House of His Parents. It was considered to be blasphemous by many reviewers, notably Charles Dickens, who said Millais made the Holy Family look like alcoholics and slum dwellers, adopting contorted and absurd medieval poses. So, let's start the Realism artists and artworks. First in the line is Gustave Courbet. He was a French painter. He was born in Ornans and learned his trade by copying masterpieces at the Louvre. His few accepted submissions to the Salon brought modest success, but his burial at Ornans attracted his renunciation for its blunt, ugly realism, vulgar subject matter, and lack of meaning. His notoriety launched his career as the leader of French realism and earned him much recognition. This is true. The viewers wants to see a fiction in a not fiction. Mas gusto natin makita yung katotohanan sa isang art. But what we want to see is the real. Kaya naging kilala si Courbet. Courbet painted landscapes and scenes of poverty. He caused much notoriety for his unflattering realism and vulgar subject matter. Pinapakita niya lahat kahit na against the government, like that. This is the burial at Ornans, Stonebreakers, the Painter's Studio, the Bathers, Bonjour Monsieur Courbet. Next in the line was Jean-François Millet. He was also a French painter. Born into a rural community, he earned a scholarship to study at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris in 1837. His sense of impoverished peasant farmers disturbed authorities, who perceived them as socialists following the Revolution of 1848. Millet joined the Barbizon School in France and thereafter painted landscapes. Millet specialized in scenes of peasant farmers. He was a member of the Barbizon School in France. These are the artworks of Millet: the Gleaners, the Wood Sawyers, and the Angelus. Makikita natin na halos lahat ng mga works niya ay mga manggagawa. He also said this: beauty does not lie in the face, it lies in the harmony between a person and his or her industry. Beauty is an expression. When I paint a mother, I try to render her beautiful by the mere look she gives her child. It is true. It is about connection. Next in the line, Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot. A French painter, he studied under famed classical landscape painters and would revolutionize the genre by combining modern elements with traditional style. During the summer, he traveled around Europe sketching scenes, and when winter arrived, he expanded them into paintings, often incorporating effects found in photography. Corot was the leader of the Barbizon School of Painting in France, which marked the first transition towards realism. Makikita natin sa artworks ni Corot is like a real. It's true. Kasi while in the summer, he's sketching, and in the winter, he's painting. So the real world turns into an art. This is the Bridge of Narni, the harbor of La Rochelle, and Ville d'Avray. Next is Honir Daumier. Honir Daumier is a French painter and printmaker. He was France's most famous caricaturist, who satirized politics and society with over 4,000 lithographs. He joined the staff of the journal La Caricature to criticize the governments of Louis Philippe, inspired by Rembrandt. His oil paintings use a chiaroscuro to both accurately portray the plight of lower-class folk as well as evoke a sense of sympathy. Daumier was France's most famous caricaturist, satirized politics and society in his lithographs. His paintings depicted the lower class. Caricaturist is as sketching. Parang sketching siya. These are the example of caricature of honor artworks. The third class Courage, Rue Transnonain, Gargantua. He said, photography imitates everything and expresses nothing. Next in the line was Bonheur Rosa. She was a French painter. She developed a fascination with animals after growing up with the barnyard, and later studied anatomy at slaughterhouses. As a result, Bonheur became an extremely successful animalier, or painter of animals. She exhibited often at the salon, gained great popularity and wealth, and even received the Legion d'Honneur in 1865, which had never before been awarded to a woman. She was also a strong advocate for the recognition of female artists.
These are some examples of Rosa Bonheur artworks. The Hose Fair, 1853, and The Plowing in the Nivernais, 1849. Winslow Homer, American painter. He was raised in rural Cambridge, reflected in his popular watercolors which depict farm life and marine scenes. During the Civil War, he sketched battle for Harper's Weekly. Afterwards, he settled in Maine where he continued to paint maritime subjects as well as genre scenes. He is also considered one of the foremost painter in 19th century America and a prominent figure in American art. Here is the example of his artworks. Breezing Up in 1876, The Fox Hunt in 1893, The Gulf Stream in 1899. Thomas Eakins, American painter. He studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts and spent most of his time painting the people of Philadelphia. He was primarily interested in the human figure, depicting it in portraiture and sports scene. He volunteered to teach at the Pennsylvania Academy in 1876 and made it America's top art school, but resigned in 1886 amid controversy surrounding his use of nude models. Eakins' uncompromising realism remained unpopular with the public and critics until late in life. Eakins, an American painter, spent most of his time in Philadelphia. His post-Civil War work mostly consists of scenes of spectator sports and portraiture, notable for its uncompromising realism. These are some examples of Thomas Eakins' artworks. The Gross Clinic, 1875, Mask Schmidt in a Single Skull, 1871, Miss Amelia von Buren, 1891. Henry Osawa Tanner, African-American painter. He attended the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, where he was a favorite student of Thomas Eakins. To avoid racial tension in Philadelphia, Tanner moved to Paris in 1891. There, he became a respected painter of biblical scene and exhibited regularly at the Salon, winning a medal in 1897. He was the first African-American artist to receive international recognition. Also, his father was a prominent minister and his mother a former slave who escaped the South through the Underground Railroad. These are some examples of his artworks. The Banjo Lesson, 1893, Nicodemus Visiting Jesus, 1899, and Thankful Poor, 1894. Impressionism aimed to convey an artist's impressions of a scene rather than details. Painting portrayed everyday scene during passing moments and were often painted outside. Impressionists studied the effect of light, fluidity, impermanence in the human perceptions of the natural world. They often studies Japanese prints for inspiration. The thing is, Impressionists were not trying to paint a reflection of real life, but impression of what person, atmosphere, object, or landscape look like to them, and that's why they were called Impressionists. Art movement that was originated by a group of Paris-based artists, including Berthe Morisot, Claude Monet, Auguste Renoir, Edgar Degas, Camille Picasso, and Alfred Sisley, as well as the American artist Mary Cassatt. The term Impressionism is derived from the title of Claude Monet's painting Impression, Soleil Levant, or Impression Sunrise. Impressionist work characteristically portray overall visual effect instead of details, and use short, broken brush stroke of mixed and unmixed color to achieve an effect of intense color vibration. During the latter part of 1873, Monet, Renoir, Pissarro, and Sisley organized the Cooperative and Anonymous Association of Painters, Sculptors, and Engravers to exhibit their artwork independently to mix critical response. The Impressionists exhibited together 8 times between 1874 and 1886. The individual artists achieved few financial reward from the Impressionist exhibitions, but their art gradually won a degree of public acceptance and support. Impressionists typically painted scenes of modern life and often painted outdoor or en plein air. El plein air. El plein air is a French expression that means in the open air, and is particularly used to describe the act of painting outdoors, which is also called peinture sur le motif, or painting on the ground in French. Vista, from Italian vista or view sight, a distant view or prospect, especially one seen through an opening, avenue, or passage. Flaneur, a man who observes society, usually in urban setting, a people watcher. Ang Impressionism ay nagsimula noong 19th century na binuo ng grupo ng artist sa Paris na sina Berthe Marisol, Claude Monet, Auguste Renoir, Edgar Degas, Camille Pissarro at Alfred Sisley. At kabilang dito ang American artist na si Mary Cassatt. Sila ay nagfo-focus sa outdoor scenery at sabi dito, they could capture the momentary and transient effect of sunlight by working quickly in front of their subject in the open air, rather than in a studio. Impressionist painting broke from the traditions of the Academy, favoring everyday subject matter, exaggerated color, thick paint application, and an aim to capture the movement of life as opposed to a staged scene. Impressionist painting key points. In the middle of 19th century, the Académie des Beaux-Arts dominated French art, valuing historical subjects, religious theme, and the portraits as opposed to landscape or still life. In the early 1860s, Monet, Renoir, Sisley, and Bazille met while studying under the academic artist Charles Gleyre. They discovered that they shared an interest in painting landscape and contemporary life rather than historical or mythological scenes. Impressionist painting can be characterized by their use of short, thick stroke of paint that quickly capture a subject's essence rather than details. Impressionist painting do not exploit the transparency of thin paint film, which earlier artists manipulated carefully to produce effects. Thematically, Impressionist works are focused on capturing the moment of life, or quick moments captured as if by snapshot. Académie des Beaux-Arts. The Academy was created in 1860s as a merger of the Académie de Peinture et de Sculpture, or Academy of Painting and Sculpture, founded 1848. The Académie de Musique, or Academy of Music, founded in 1669. And the Académie de Architecture, or Academy of Architecture, founded in 1671. Dito naman sa Impressionist painting, ang main subjects nila ay yung mga landscapes and scenes of everyday life. Impressionist sculpture. Modern sculpture is generally considered to have begun with the work of French sculptor Auguste Rodin. Impressionist sculpture key points. Typically, modernist artists were concerned with the representation of contemporary issues as opposed to grand historical and allegorical themes previously favored in art. Rodin modeled complex, turbulent, deeply packed surface into clay, and many of his most notable sculpture clashed with the predominant figure sculpture tradition, in which work were decorative, formulaic, or highly thematic. The spontaneity evident in his work associate him with the Impressionists, though he never identified as such. Rodin's most original work departed from traditional themes of methodology and allegory in favor of modeling the human body with realism and celebrating individual character and physicality. It was the freedom and creativity which with Rodin used these practices, along with his more open attitude toward bodily pose, sensual subject matter, and non-realistic surface, that marked the remaking of traditional 19th century sculptural techniques into the prototype for modern sculpture. Through his work crossed many stylistic boundaries, and he did not identify as an impressionist. Especially, Degas is nonetheless regarded as one of the founders of Impressionism. The sculpture Little Dancer of 14 Years by Edgar Degas was shown in the Impressionist exhibition of 1881 and drew a great deal of controversy due to its departures from historical precedent, a key motif of the Impressionists. Auguste Rodin was a French sculptor. Although Rodin is generally considered the progenitor of modern sculpture, he did not set out rebel against the past. He was schooled traditionally, took a craftsman-like approach to his work, and desired academic recognition, although he was never accepted into Paris' foremost school of art. Sa Impressionist sculpture, karamihan ng mga artist dito ay gumagamit ng nature upang mas magkaroon ng siglang kanilang mga gawa. Isa na dito si Auguste Rodin, ang pinakamatalinong artist ng impressionistic sculpture. At sabi dito, his work has an irregular surface on which sunlight causes glittering. These sparkles of sunlight give the sculpture a new kind of liveliness.
Impressionist artists and artworks. Monet Claude, French painter, he was one of the founders of French Impressionism. He used small strokes of vivid color and rich textures to capture the transient effects of light. His circle of artists hosted its own independent art show after being rejected by the Salon, and the new movement was derisively named after Monet's impression, sunrise painting. Much of his work depicts the gardens and lily ponds at his study in Giverny, France. Despite being rejected for a scholarship in 1859, Monet moved to Paris to study with help from his family. However, instead of choosing the more customary career path of a salon painter by enrolling at the École des Beaux-Arts, Monet attended the more avant-garde Académie Suzy, where he met fellow artist Camille Pissarro. Next one is Impressionist artists and artworks of Manet Edouard. French painter, he studied old masters such as Velázquez, but the modernity of his early work shocked the art world. His Lettre d'honneur sur a Herbe was rejected by the Salon and exhibited at the Salon des Refuses, hosted by Napoleon III in 1863. The image of the nude in the context of modern life was highly controversial. The exhibition of Olympia at the 1865 Salon was even more scandalous and was considered immoral. Manet did not exhibit his work with the Impressionists, but after 1870, he began painting in plein air with Monet and lightened his style. Lettre d'honneur sur a Herbe, originally titled Le Bain, is a large oil-on-canvas painting by Edouard Manet, created in 1862 and 1863. It depicts a female nude and scantily dressed female bather on a picnic with two fully dressed men in a rural setting. The next Impressionist artist and artworks is Renoir Pierre Auguste, a French painter. He first worked as a porcelain painter, then studied at the École des Beaux-Arts, where he met the Impressionists. He used their techniques to express the vivacity of the human figure. With vivid broad strokes of light, he painted scenes of youth and leisure in lively locations such as cafes and gardens. Alongside Monet, he lived in poverty and painted by the Seine River. in the 1880s, as his success as a portraitist grew. Renoir left Impressionism and turned to classical subjects. His artworks is The Moulin de la Galette, 1876, A Girl with a Watering Can, 1876, and Luncheon of the Boating Party, 1881. The next Impressionist artist and artworks, Pissarro Camille, a French painter. He met Monet at the Swiss Academy and became his close friend and fellow outcast artist. Together, they acquired lasting affinity for plein air painting. During the Franco-Prussian War, Pissarro fled to England and most of his early work was destroyed, with many paintings used as floor mats. Upon his return to France, he organized and guided the Impressionists as a father figure from 1873 to 1880s. After 1885, he worked with Seurat and experimented with the Neo-Impressionist style. Camille Pissarro was a Danish-French Impressionist and Neo-Impressionist painter born on the island of St. Thomas. His importance resides in his contribution to both Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. Pissarro studied from great forerunners including Gustave Courbet and Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot. Three of his artwork is Place du Théâtre Français, 1889, Les Hill Pontarlier, 1867, and A Road in Louveciennes, 1872. The next Impressionist artist and artworks, Degas Edgar, French painter, draftsman, and sculptor. Switching from law school to painting, Degas studied old masters, especially Ingres, and painted portraits. He eagerly joined the Impressionists after meeting Manet at the Louvre in 1861. However, he was aloof and continuous with the other painters and mocked them for painting in plein air. In contrast, Degas carefully composed his works in his studio to simulate snapshots in time, claiming, "No art was ever less spontaneous than mine." His fascination with Parisian urban life inspired the portraits of dancers and horses for which he is famous. His artwork are The Dance Class, 1876, A Carriage at the Races, 1872, and A Little Dancer of 14 Years, 1881. The next Impressionist artist and artworks is Maurice Berthe, French painter. Working as a copyist at the Louvre, she was introduced to plein air painting by Corot and was favorably received in the Salon de Paris. She developed a particularly close relationship with Manet and subsequently joined the Impressionists. Berthe Marie Pauline Morisot was a painter and a member of the circle of painters in Paris who became known as the Impressionists. She was described by Gustave Geffroy in 1894 as one of les trois grandes dames of Impressionism alongside. His famous artwork are The Cradle, 1872, In a Villa at the Seaside, 1874, and In the Dining Room, 1875. The next Impressionist artist and artworks is Cassatt Mary, American painter. She studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts at age 17 during the American Civil War, and afterwards settled in Paris to study and paint. Her early works were well received at the Salon, but in 1877, her entries were rejected. Degas invited her to exhibit with the Impressionists, and Cassatt became the only American artist to do so. She depicted contemporary domestic life with great intimacy and specialized in portraits of mothers and children. Her admiration for Degas would soon blossom into a strong friendship, and Cassatt exhibited 11 of her paintings with the Impressionists in 1879. The show was a huge success both commercially and critically, and similar exhibits were staged in 1880 and 1881. The next Impressionist artist and artworks, Whistler James Abbott McNeill. American painter, he was kicked out of West Point for his behavior and studied art in Paris. His avant-garde style disregarded the conventional importance of subject, matter, and narrative and instead focused on color and form to convey mood. This approach, analogous to musical composition, was reflected in his painting titles. Whistler moved to London in 1859, where his flamboyant wardrobe, arrogant behavior, and abstract style offended Victorian society. He was left financially ruined after suing a critic who said he flung a pot of paint in the public's face. James Abbott McNeill Whistler was an American artist active during the American Gilded Age and based primarily in the United Kingdom. He was averse to sentimentality and moral illusion in painting, and a leading proponent of the credo, art for art's sake. His art are arrangement in gray and black, Whistler's Mother, 1871, Nocturne Blue and Gold, Old Battersea Bridge, 1877, and Nocturne in Black and Gold, The Falling Rockets, 1891. The next Impressionist artist and artworks is Rodin Auguste. French sculptor, he was rejected by the École des Beaux-Arts and instead worked hard as an apprentice. On a trip to Italy, he was profoundly impressed by Michelangelo's sculpture. His first major work, The Age of Bronze, was barely accepted into the Paris Salon, yet it was so realistic that Rodin was accused of casting a live model. Thereafter, his fame grew and he produced sculptures for wealthy patrons and monuments for the French government. Rodin's unique, naturalist style defied artistic movement but reflected the Impressionist philosophy. He was generally considered the founder of modern sculpture. He was schooled traditionally and took a craftsman-like approach to his work. Rodin possessed a unique ability to model a complex, turbulent, and deeply pocketed surface in clay. His famous artworks are The Thinker, 1879 to 1889, The Walking Man, 1877 to 1878, The Kiss, 1889, The Gates of Hell, 1879 to 1889, The Burghers of Calais, 1889, The Age of Bronze, 1877. That's all.